The Secret of Working Knowingly with God, adapted from a talk given by Walter Russell in 1946. The quality and pattern of your outgivings will crystallize into body form in the image of your thinking. That is law. What you give out will return to you in your image. The Secret of Working Knowingly with God by Walter Russell. This is a purposeful talk in an endeavor to give you a better comprehension of the relationship of man to his universe and to his God. Its ultimate purpose is to uplift the individual to a higher being, and by uplifting the individual, we uplift the entire human race, one notch higher. The thing that holds man back is his disbelieving, his doubting, and especially his lack of comprehension. Everyone is absolutely dependent on God at every moment. We can do nothing without him, and you might as well know it. And the more you know it, the more power comes to you to manifest God. I am, however, a bit reluctant to give this talk because of the personal equation that comes into it. I very much dislike the necessity of using the personal pronoun I. But so many people have asked me specifically and with great sincerity to tell them how it is possible to acquire a complete education from the cosmos, from the invisible universe. They are so mystified by it that I think you are entitled to as good as a dissertation upon the subject as I can give you. Tonight's talk is that of a life, my own life. It should uplift and inspire you to greater and higher things, and in that sense, I am glad to give it. The reason I can tell this is that I have lived it, and because I have lived it, the proof should be believed, because the evidence is there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, and Glenn Clark would have not written his little book. I am also often asked, what have you got that I haven't got? Why is it that I cannot do those things which you can do? My only answer is, you have what I have. We all have it, but one is aware of it and the other is not. One works toward the body, the other toward the spirit. All of my life I have been working toward the spirit with God, knowingly, and the proof of it is there. We start at the beginning. I am going to start right back at the very beginning, at 7 years of age, when something tremendous happened to me, something indescribable, something so beautiful, so wonderful, a sort of complete blotting out of everything concerning the physical universe, concerning my body. A great burst of changing colors, blue, violet, orange, seemed to fill and pervade all space and me. I was swallowed up in it. Then that ceased, and there was a blinding flash, and I stood motionless. I had been playing marbles with other boys, and was holding marbles in my hand. Instead of tossing them, I walked away. I realized that something had happened, but I couldn't tell what it was. Within me was a vibration of such exquisite rhythm and harmony, such beauty and ecstasy, that I thought something had descended from the heavens, and it had. For a long time I wandered in the fields. I climbed up into an apple tree and sat there for a long, long time. Then I went home and tried to get my mother to explain what had happened to me. I told her all about it, and she said, "Well, if you're not all right tomorrow, I'll take you to the doctor." Tomorrow, I was all right, so she did not take me to the doctor. The effect of the experience lasted for days. I was 7 years of age. I had started school at 5. Now I found that I could not go to school. I did go as I should, but I just couldn't stay there. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't open books and look at them, so I wandered. That lasted for days. I felt that I was a different being, that I was something else than I had ever known before. I wish I could describe it to you. I had my first glimpse of that other universe, that which we call the conscious universe, but I prefer to call it the knowing universe, because it is the beginning and the end. It is the foundation of all power, our knowledge, and our life. I had been living in the knowing universe, but I was not aware of it. I found myself doing extraordinary things. Then it all passed. I found myself doing extraordinary things. I was playing the piano very well at that age, but I found I could play much better, astonishingly better. Everybody noticed. As I practiced, I found that there was something inside of me seemingly talking to me and telling me that God was working with me. Not the God nature in me, but the supreme force. That was something that I didn't understand at the time and couldn't call God. But there was some unknown tremendous force telling me, when I touched the keys on the piano, for instance, to do something else rather than what I was used to doing before. There was more music in my playing, more soul in it, more beauty and more skill. It seemed that I had doubled my power of expressing myself in music almost overnight. I went back to school after that wore away, but found that I couldn't open books anymore. There seemed to be something like a hand or a wall put up that kept me from opening books. And if I opened them, I had to close them, because I had become aware that what was in those books was either of no importance or it wasn't so. And if there were on mathematics or grammar or anything of that nature that I did not need to know, in fact, all I could do in school was sit there. I was judged dumb. I was the bright boy of the class who had suddenly turned dumb. I failed in mathematics. I failed in everything. But I could do whatever required knowledge and inspiration. I amazed people with what I did along those lines. I amazed people when they asked me and I answered them. What I wished to know, I knew. Time went on and another May came and it happened again, but not as prolonged this time. It happened again the following May, but not as long, but not as prolonged, but enough, however, to make me aware that there was something happening to prepare me for a different kind of life. I was taken out of school and put to work. I'm very, very thankful for that, because I did not like school after the age of 7. It was very different and very unpleasant, and it seemed to me to be very unnecessary. What I wished to know, I knew. What I desired to do, I asked that I might do and started doing it with the utmost conviction that I could do it. At 10 and 11 and 12 years of age, it happened again. At 13, it happened again, more and more. Every year in May, from 10 to 14 days, I would always have to go into the woods, go somewhere away from people. It was noticed, yes. My mother called it his queer spells, and he always gets over them, so they didn't worry. By the time I reached 14, twice 7, I knew that there was a deep purpose in life for me. I was commanded to demonstrate power that was drawn from a source that was within me, rather than from a source outside of me. Then I died. Then I had one of the most dreadful diseases that could afflict humankind, the bubonic plague. It was called the black diphtheria. Doctors had taken cultures from my throat which were blacker than a case knife. Black diphtheria had destroyed my throat and shut off my breathing. And then I died. I was pronounced dead by one doctor. 2 others were called in and they pronounced me dead also. They sent for the undertaker. The undertaker had arrived. The soul does not leave the body right away. The consciousness does not. The awareness of the purpose that I must fulfill gave me knowledge of the healing principle right then and there. And I was commanded that I should use it upon myself. I did. And once again, I was strongly alive in the body. I arose from that bed and I was well. The doctors were amazed. My father was sitting by my bedside weeping. I couldn't gather my senses all at once, and I wondered why he was weeping. I said, "Don't cry, father. I'll put that coal in." The last thing I remembered before I became ill was that I was supposed to put a ton of coal in through the cellar window. Everyone was amazed. "I'm not dead," I said. "I'm thoroughly well." They sent some other doctors, and then they too were astounded. It didn't seem possible. It could not be. They all talked so much about it, saying that it just couldn't be, that the thing called fear got into me. And then I wondered about it myself. So many things were said that this fear, even though a little bit of it gave me total paralysis of my body from head to toe, it took fully 6 months to pass away. I had that paralysis of my body due simply to the fact that the doctors were saying that aroused doubts and fears in me that I was even alive. That was when I was 14, twice 7. Every May after that, it happened again and again, and always I did things that I could never have done before. I always wandered in the woods and sought the intense ecstatic joy of the soul with the consciousness stepping in and out of the body, in and out of the body. That is the only way I can express it to you. I was impelled to write things. I want you to know what I mean by that by reading several passages from what I later called the Book of Early Whisperings. For always in that state, I was impelled to write things. During those 10 days or so, I was impelled to write my impressions and lock them up. No one had ever seen them. Some instinct told me to lock them up and keep them. The Book of Early Whisperings is the junior edition of the Divine Iliad, which came later, and that was also locked up in the same way. In 1921, I found out why I had to lock them up, because I was made fully aware of my purpose, and those things were not to appear until after 1946. I'm going to read a section from the Book of Early Whisperings. Before I do so, however, I want to tell you why I am doing this. It is to make you aware that when you are fully conscious of God in you and God working within you knowingly, you cannot produce anything which is not enduring art. You produce perfection. You produce a consummate art. It couldn't be otherwise. Why I am now reading to you, I wrote at age of 19. I had never written anything before. And yet when some of the doctors later in 1921 were examining me to see if I were really out of my mind or not, they came across some of these writings. There was a doctor, a lawyer, and an alienist, and one of them said to my wife, "Leave him alone. There's something happening to him that we don't understand. An insane man is not logical. He couldn't be logical." These writings out Walt Whitman. They are not only logical, but they are beautiful poetic art, perfect literature. I had never studied literature or literary form. Since 9.5, I had not even been to school. As I read this to you, I want you to feel that the stepping in and out of the body into the observation of physical phenomena. Up until then, nothing of this sort could even be known, and that being within the body for a moment and then fully out of it. The awakening. I breathe the air from the hills. The strength of the hills is in me. It courses through my veins. It comes to me from the mountaintops beyond the hills, where the eye within me is fixed. It is light. I feel it ever coming. I take it into me. I feel the strength of the light that is, I am taking into me. I smell the sweet odor and I drink in the sunshine. I open my lungs to the forest. I draw strength from a superpower which is light. I am that power. It is all of me. I am all of it. Within my feet, firmly planted to earth, I tear trees from their roots, and dash them aside. It is nothing for me to tear trees from the earth, tree by tree, or forest by forest. My strength transcends that of a tree. It is mightier than that of the forest. The strength of all forests and all of the hills is in me. The earth lends me its power. The wind lends me their power. The winds of the earth are my breath. I breathe, and forests rise and fall. With the deer I run and leap, but they are motionless when I run with them. With the bird I fly, and more effectually. Sitting by the pathside, I need but to think of there and I am there, or some other where, and in another breath I am back again. For the deer is a deer, and the bird is a bird, but I am a man with a soul, a man with an uncaged soul. I wander with myself in my world, my body a wandering with my soul, companions for just a little while, then my soul wanders alone. My body is but the house of my soul, its carriage, the roots which tie it to earth, when it will be tied. It is not with me. I am sure of that. I have long known that. Someday I'll write down what I know of it, and what each new moment whispers to me, and the silences. What the silences of it I will write down someday if I ever can. Little things call my soul back from afar. Little things, the curve of a sapling, the shadow of a cloud over a meadow, and the same little things send it wandering back again into space, while my body awaits it on the path, or goes to meet it, absently, all unconsciousness of its movement, like a dead leaf in a flowing stream. The spirit of beauty balances my soul, as well of running water replenishes the earth. I seek beauty in the far spaces of my wandering, and I find it when thus wandering. Always I find it when my weightless soul extends within the extension of the stars, and leaves the house of the clay which binds it to the mountainside. Rains replenish the well, as beauty replenishes my soul. Without the beauty of the great out of doors, I feel that my body will become too parched and dry to be a companion to my soul. There is a brook to the right. The water falls over the rock into a limpid pool. I go eagerly to see it. The water drops over in the shadow of a great rock, painted with lichens, like a bronze painted by rain. The sun peeps into the pool, and some very yellow leaves capture its rays to herald its coming. The green moss is velvet, the softest of velvet. Winter green are there awaiting me, and checker ferns. Arbutus leaves cover a bit of turf. Its pink blossoms sing their spring song. Pulpit jacks show me their zebra stripings modestly. The shadow of a leaf falls upon another leaf, and still another leaf silhouettes itself upon a rock. Quite unaware of me, a busy ant makes its way across the rock, carrying something much larger than itself. I am as certain that I am that ant as that I am I. I carry that burden with the ant. I feel my body straining with that burden of the ant. I am alone with all this activity. Shall I turn to the right or to the left? What matters it? Even now I feel my soul parting from its anchorage of heavy clay. I see my light interwoven with the universal light. From the Book of Early Whisperings. That is the essence of my boyhood. That beautiful spiritual foundation is the rock upon which I built my life. The desire to do wonderful and beautiful things, to interpret the rhythms of nature was strong in me. I expressed it in painting. I expressed it in these writings, many of them, a goodly-sized volume of them, which will come out some day not far in the future. I also expressed it in my music. I expressed power as well as great art. I had it thoroughly in my consciousness that there was nothing I should do that was not masterly. Do you see that line? It is nothing for me to tear trees from the earth tree by tree or forest by forest. That is the impression that I always had, that there was nothing I could not do. Tearing trees or forests apart by their roots was merely a symbol of the power I felt at all times. If I ever desired to do a thing, no matter what that thing was, I did it. I always felt God in me. I felt God sitting beside me at the piano or within me, making me do much more than I could ever have done before, and in less time. Knowledge belongs to the spiritual universe. I found myself getting more and more acquainted with the knowing universe, and beginning to know rather than to think. I began to segregate knowledge from information and knowledge from thinking. Thinking is taking knowledge apart and setting it in motion. Thinking belongs to the electric universe. Knowledge belongs to the spiritual universe. I spent my hours and days and leisure moments in knowing. The invisible universe became mine. Every 7 years this experience happened, increasingly more, and every 7th year I did more amazing things. It was during one of those periods that I started designing buildings, because the artists needed buildings for their studios. I knew nothing about architecture. I opened an architect's office, employed engineers, and designed buildings upon a new plan that you must have read about in that little book, so I won't waste time talking about it now. It was a new plan of ownership called cooperative ownership. The lawyer said it couldn't be done. I know it can be done, I told him. I knew principles. I knew the underlying principles. I wrote what was called the first proprietary lease ever written. The lawyer said it was sound law. Of course it was sound law. It came from the source. I knew it. If you want to do anything, start doing it. I always adopted that slogan of mine that if you want to do anything, start doing it. Start at once doing the thing you wish to do with full awareness and full comprehension that there is nothing that can stop you from doing it. If you desire to do it, write that desire upon your heart and take it to sleep with you. If the answer is given in the morning, that says go ahead and do it. That means the power of God is there. With that full knowledge, I would start doing it, and I knew before I started that I would succeed. I say write that question upon your heart because I had begun to learn that nights were more important than the days. I have been asked many times to tell what the nights mean and what happens during sleep when the body is supposedly unconscious and wasting time. To the best of my ability, I have tried to put it into words. The night is the time for knowing. The day is the time for acting. Our bodies are not active during the night. They are active during the day. Our minds are not busy during the day conceiving because they are busy acting in the physical world. Therefore, we haven't time to give to inspiration, to knowing, unless we take ourselves away from everything and lose ourselves in meditation. My meditations were in the night, when my body was asleep. Consciousness is not what you think it is. You think that when you stop thinking or are asleep, that you are unconscious. There is no such thing as a state of unconsciousness. When the electric voltage of your body is lowered so that the electric current flowing through it isn't strong as to keep you in a state of what is called wakefulness, you sink into slumber when night comes simply because your body has fatigued, and it is in the opposite cycle of its day. One part of it being the positive, the other the negative part of the cycle. Just as with the planet, the day side being the positive side, and the night the negative or expansive side. The violets in the meadow fold up at night, and the cattle lie down. Everything seemingly goes to sleep because the electric force that winds matter up and gives it what we call the expression of life lowers its voltage. Your body is likewise lowered in voltage, so the electric current will not operate sufficiently to arouse those countless millions of little memories that you have photographed on your brain. When those little photographic images or records of events and things that you have observed are no longer functioning, you then become unaware of physical existence. I won't say you stop thinking, because very few people think at all. There are but electrically aware of things, and so we unreel those electrical photograph memories upon our brain and use them over and over again automatically. We call that thinking, but it isn't thinking at all. It is an electrical awareness of an electrical existence and nothing more. It makes people aware of sensation. Thinking is an extension of the mind itself. Thinking is an electric extension in the light of the knowing mind, extending that knowledge to waves of light and setting them in motion to express the ideas that are in stillness. Consciousness is a glorious awareness of divine being. Consciousness is not thinking. The awareness of consciousness in one who has lived in the God universe for a long time is an ecstatic and glorious awareness of divine being. It never leaves one day or one night or day unless one has disobeyed and broken some law that makes it impossible for the mind to be freed from the body. But if the body is normal and comfortable so that it can sleep, the mind can be freed from the body. The mind will go on and work for you and do just what you want it to do. It will give you that part of the whole idea which you were asking for your use the next day. So I found during these years that what I wished to know in order to put into action the next day, I asked for when I went to sleep, and I had that knowledge when I awoke. I did not have to waste time the next day taking that idea apart bit by bit and putting it into motion, but taking that idea apart. I mean this. In consciousness, you conceive ideas as a whole. The whole idea comes to you in a flash, but it may take 10 years to work it out by experimentation in laboratories or by countless effort of putting into motion the different elements of matter, and by experimenting with all sorts of things to give you what you conceived as whole in that flash of time, that flash of timelessness. It may take 10 years for you to pick it apart by thinking out your knowing. So the knowing is the spiritual part of life, and in living in the knowing universe is what makes me different from other people. And the longer I lived in it, the more I worked in it, the more I was aware that I was being prepared for something great, something indefinite, gradually getting more force, gradually coming to a head, gradually feeling its way towards something very definite as each May came. This wonderful ecstasy of light came to glorify those 12 or 14 days each year. My indescribable experience in 1921. Then came the great experience in 1921. I was totally unaware that it would be different from anything else, but it was so utterly different. It was an experience which was so indescribable that I am not even going to attempt to do it. It is a very dangerous thing to go through because I doubt if very many even could recover from it. I doubt if I would have been willing to come back into the physical world if I hadn't had the message, the command that I received. The purpose for which I had been prepared all my life was so specific that I had to come back. And even then, it took 3 months to be willing to come back to a world which seemed so coarse and so terrible. Those 39 days and nights were of great ecstasy, in which the body and consciousness were practically severed. I was aware of my body, yes, like an instrument that we need to pick up and use when we want, but it didn't seem to be me. I had control of it just as I could pick up a pen to write with, but I felt my body was detached from me. I felt it when it was asleep, that I was off on a shelf somewhere, and I was glad of it. The more I was freed of it, the happier I was, and the more ecstatic. Of course, the family was worried, and naturally, friends were worried too, and wanted to take me on an ocean voyage and all sorts of things. Papers everywhere. The Divine Iliad in parts. Finally, after the doctors examined me and advised my wife to leave me alone, everyone did, and I was left alone. There were papers everywhere. The Divine Iliad was in parts everywhere, fragments of it, connected and disconnected. At first, my writing was so illegible, going uphill and downhill, shaking and quaking, that afterward I could hardly decipher what I had written on those papers. And then I commanded my body to write perfectly, and I wrote like a schoolchild in plain script, perfectly legible. In those 39 days and nights, God spoke to me continuously in the language of light, which I knew as well as I knew the English language that I am speaking to you now. It had a meaning, a vital meaning, a meaning fraught with the safety of the whole human race. It necessitated the uplift of the whole human race with new comprehension of this new age. The seed of that new comprehension for the uplift of the human race was mine to sow in the minds of 10 men, who would again reach out to 10 more men, and another 10, and another 10, until there would be legions. And the legions would sow the seed of love to offset the seeds of hate and fear and greed that have brought us to this terrible impasse that we have been in. The old order, where fear and hatred were abroad in the land, together with greed and selfishness. Nation robbing nation, nation killing nation. That order must cease. It was then made known to me in 1921 that the first crop of the harvest that we had been reaping in the war was not finished. We had been chastened sufficiently. The whole world would be drenched in blood and agony. All that carnage will have ceased by 1946, and by that day, I must be ready to begin to tell you, and you, and you, what I am telling you. I didn't even have the capacity of telling it in words. I had to prepare for it. I did not have the oratorical ability to tell it. God said, I would have it, and I must have it, and I must prepare for it. I knew I would, and I have. I have taken that responsibility upon myself, and I am asking you to take upon yourselves the responsibility of spreading this message to all the world. The Divine Iliad. I quote my instructions from the Divine Iliad. It has been commanded of me to turn man's eyes away from his jungle, to tell him to look upon the face of the Lord, and know God's ecstasy in him. These are the words of the Lord. Hear thou them through me. The world of man is decadent. Go thou and resurrect it in my name. The beauty of my balanced thinking has man buried in his dank tombs. and set ugliness in the images of man's earth, thinking as idols for his worshipping. Man might, is he placing before omnipotence in me? Love is he seeking to crucify and defy brutality. Barbarity of his own inviting is e'en now crossing his horizon to crush him who would exalt it. The seeds of hate is he sowing for the babble of many tongues to multiply. I am a patient God. All men will come to me in due time, but the agony of awaiting that day shall be theirs alone. And that day shall not come until man himself shall cleanse himself from his own unbalanced thinking. Prepare thou, therefore, my messenger, to the cosmic age of ecstatic man, which is now in the deep dark before its dawning, and be thou ready for thine appointed day, when man's own chastening shall awaken him in me. 7 years hast thou to prepare for thy first beginning, to manifest thy messengership to man. Guard well thy knowing, and herald not thy messengership, for these first 7 years of thy preparing. Then shall all the world begin to reap the harvest of self-inflicted suffering sown by his own hands in the seed of his unbalanced thinking. And the period of man's self-cleansing shall be another 3 sevens of years, added to the 7 of thy novatate years. And thine appointed day shall be in the 18th year of those 3 sevens. And be thou ready for that day, for thou shalt know no rest in worthily preparing to fulfill thine appointed task. Before that day of man's rebirth in me, his self-made way of earth will be deep strewn with the ashes of his earth-planned tower of self-might, denying me in him. Untold suffering shall await him in the blood-drenched road which leads toward the jungle of his own seeking. Anguish will be his lot, and there will be weeping in every home. And many who see such agony in man will say to thee that a God of love cannot be if man to be Son of God, and God the loving Father, Mother of all man. But I say to thee, all men are one. The thinking of one is the thinking of all. And so shall the world harvest be that which was sown in the seed of world thinking. Man's world is the sum total of man's thinking. It is what all world thinking makes it. If love be in the world, hate cannot also be. In the early days of this cycle, my messenger of that day said, love thy brother as thyself. But man has not yet faintly comprehended its meaning. I now say more, for man is not now so new, and can well comprehend my meaning after the coming carnage. By man shall have spent its furies, as the calm of earth's storms always follow those storms. These words I now say for newly comprehending man of his new cycle. Love ye one another, all men, for ye are one in me. Whatsoever you do to one in me, ye do to all, for all are one in me. Love thy brother as thyself. Serve thy brother before thyself. Lift high thy brother, lift him to high pinnacles, for thy brother is thyself. For verily I say, love of self, or a nation of selves, turns neighbor against neighbor, and nation against nation. Self-love breeds hate and sows its seed in all the winds to blow wherever it will. Wherefore say I, love of neighbor by neighbor, and nation by nation, unites all men as one. Serve first thy brother. Hurt first thyself rather than thy neighbor. Gain naught from him, unbalanced by thy giving. Protect thou the weak with thy strength. For if thou use thy strength against him, his weakness will prevail against thee, and thy strength will avail thee naught. Such is my decree, which thou well knowest in the inviolate workings of my law, which holds balance in all creating things. See thou that man well knows this principle as the foundation of his new day. I have herein given you parts of this unpublished sections of the message, which specifically instructs me in quite some detail as to the very manner and method of its delivery, as well as its time for delivery, yes, and even as to my failings as a man of earth, manifesting God as a man of earth. The most important fact of your life. I have given you these instructions for the express purpose of bringing deeply home to you the most important, even though hardly believable, fact of your life. This fact is that if you know God in you, not just abstractly believing in it with some slight reservations, and work knowingly with God, your life will be the highest of high, forever knowing the peace which passeth understanding, and your achievements will be mighty, for the divine you will be in them. The knowledge of your oneness with God is not possible of instant acceptance by any human in its fullness, as you will instantly accept the knowledge that 2 and 2 are 4. Such illumination is too wonderful for quick unfoldment in man, for every cell in man's body cries out the selfhood of the body, and every sensation of man tells him of reality as being in the senses. It is not a quick process to forget body and separability of bodies just by being told about it, even though you believe it. Your body is the high hurdle which you must surmount in order to know your divinity. This story of my illumination will help you to realize that you can put aside your body at will, to a greater or lesser extent, and know your divinity to the extent that you can put your body aside. Now, as an answer to those who have asked me, how in the world can knowledge be acquired in that way? I mean definite, specific knowledge, not abstractions, but how can you make charts of the chemical elements or the heavens? How can you write a chemistry hundreds of years beyond your day without studying it from books? Well, it wasn't in books anyway. If I had gone to books, how could I have gotten it when I wasn't there? Everything that is in books is acquired bit by men and put in books as they think they see it. The physical universe, an illusion of motion. This physical universe is an illusion of motion. The railroad tracks seem to meet upon the horizon. That is an illusion of perspective, which only fools the artist. It doesn't have anything to do with chemistry or science. The illusion goes on down through the whole universe. The illusion of motion deceives everyone, so that the profound laws have been written by scientists which don't have the slightest foundation of truth in them, much less the very fundamental laws that I could see behind the scenes. When I came back, I bought textbooks to find out the names of that which I knew in space, in the universe, in another way as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 4, 3, 2, 1, and back to 0. That is all I needed to know. And the names of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., are in textbooks. Lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, one series of elements after another. But to me they were always 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 in everything. Whether that was the octave spectrum of color or the octave on the piano, every expression of motion is in the octave wave, and I knew the wave. And in the wave is the secret of creation, and I had that. I knew it in a timeless flash. And God said to me, there will be those who will question. There will be those who doubt. There will be those who crucify you. I give you to thee a sign by which thou canst prove thyself. Thou who hast never known a chemist's laboratory shall know chemistry beyond men. To thee all chemists will come for knowledge of the light. Thou who hast never known the stars, save with thine adoring eyes, shall know the stars beyond all men. All astronomers will come to thee for the new mappings of the universe of the stars, which thou shalt give to them. To thee who study mathematics was a dreary thing, shall I give the master key to mathematics. To thee all mathematicians will come for knowledge of the key to motion and the curvature of space. And one thing after another like that, I'm trying to recall the exact words from the Divine Iliad. That was to be a sign whereby I could prove my right to speak with authority. And the signs never failed. And with them came the admonition that I should keep perfectly quiet and not herald my messengership for 7 years, but should prepare for the first rehearsal of it by thine written word. The Four Freedoms, Walter Russell, sculptor. Freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. The four freedoms of common humanity are as much elements of man's needs as air and sunlight, bread and salt. Deprive him of all these freedoms, and he dies. Deprive him of a part of them, and part of him withers. Give them to him in full and abundant measure, and he will cross the threshold of a new age, the greatest age of man. These freedoms are the rights of men of every creed and every race, wherever they live. This is their heritage, long withheld. Franklin D. Roosevelt. I, as a sculptor, followed the suggestion of the president and gave this symbol of four freedoms, that of four angels with upraised wings, a visual form in order that the world might better visualize the standard which they must henceforth attain. Walter Russell. My first book. So I wrote a book in those 7 years and gave it to the world. Science laughed at it, scoffed at it, threw it in the wastebasket, and then gradually discovered that what I had written was so that men took these ideas as their own. 2 Nobel Prizes have been given for ideas that were written in that book. A prominent scientist wrote to the New York Sun, remonstrating why scientists should take those ideas of mine and put them out as their own and not give me credit for them. He remonstrated me with, also, for not insisting upon having the credit. It makes no difference to me whatsoever, I told him. So long as those ideas are brought into the world, they will come back to their source someday, and it will be known where they came from. That is all I want. I want those ideas to go out into the world and begin to take effect. Gradually, they did take effect. The head of the physics department of one of the great universities resigned his position because he could not teach there any longer. He had been a private pupil of mine for months, and he said he could never go back and teach, even though he had a family and was paying installments on a house. So it was a serious thing for him to give up a well-paying position. He set up a chemist's laboratory of his own. He is a consulting chemist now, and has made 3 times his former salary the first year. He is making more than 5 times that now. For months, I had lunch with him every Tuesday at the Lotus Club in New York. He talked to me each Tuesday until he got to know my language. So that started out with one physicist who knew, then another, and then another, and another. And then my book became accepted and letters were published in the newspapers. Letters that were for it as well as against it. The science editor of the Associated Press then wrote another letter stating that my observations and my writings should be studied because it may be that I had a new key to things. A well-known physicist wrote to the New York Times and said that I had better go back to my easel, that I was a good painter, but I was blaspheming Newton and Kepler by questioning their laws. The New York Times let me answer in that same column, and my answer was so convincing to this man that he invited me to lunch. At the luncheon table, he told me that he was about to give up upon a problem he had been working on for months, He was about to give it up because he could no longer hope to solve it. I said, "What is it? Tell me. Perhaps I can help you." It was very difficult for him to even be polite. "If I can't solve it," he said, "how in the world can you pretend to do it? I can't take you into my laboratory." "I don't want to go into your laboratory. Tell me your problem." And he did. There at the luncheon table, I solved the problem for him. I said, "You are looking on the wrong side of the fence for the stabilizer you need. Arsenic and bismuth and all those negative elements, according to his theory, was where he would find that which he was looking for." I said, "Two elements on the positive side will do it, either aluminum or boron. If you want conductivity, use aluminum. If you want brittleness, use boron." "I want conductivity," he answered. And he found out that aluminum did it. He called me up at 2 o'clock in the morning and told me so and thanked me. And then he wrote a long letter of apology to the New York Times. And gradually that specific new knowledge that I had went far, far beyond the science of that day and even of this day. I haven't begun to breathe all of it yet, not even begun. A little at a time only. And that got me a doctor's degree of science. A man who had never been in a university getting a doctor's degree of science. Then I was elected president of the Society of Arts and Sciences, a very dignified position, with a very dignified society founded by Herbert Spencer over 50 years before. Since then, I have come to know the greatest scientists in the world. I gave lectures there and in universities and at engineers' clubs. When a medal was bestowed on Thomas Edison, I gave a scientific lecture and always went a little bit farther than what they knew, just enough to set them talking. And they respected me because so many things had come true. Hydrogen, not number one element. Then the great time came when I was given an interview by one of the greatest chemists of California. I gave my lecture on hydrogen to 400 of the most distinguished scientists in the world. One more little idea, one step in breaking down the old suppositions, the old patterns, the old designs that believed the hydrogen was the number one element in the series, when there were numerous other preceding it that they didn't know anything about. They also thought that hydrogen was a single element. I told them there were 6 other full-tone elements in it, a whole octave in it. That was a complex element. They couldn't believe it, but they went testing in their laboratories. They took it apart. They called those other elements isotopes. Isotopes are supposedly split tones like the black notes between 2 white notes on the piano. You split a tone into half. In chemistry, they call that an isotope. They're not isotopes, I told them. They're full-tone elements of that octave. Oh, but they have to be isotopes, they insisted. We have no place on our table of the elements for them otherwise. It throws out all our other theories on the structure of the atom. I said, you might as well just throw them out then now, because you will eventually. In that lecture, I told them they could have a different kind of water, that if oxygen united with one of those so-called isotopes of hydrogen, we would have a water that could be intensely valuable for future chemical life. So heavy water was discovered from that, and that heavy water is the basis of the atomic bomb. In the charts I have made 2 elements that have been discovered very recently, neptunium and plutonium, constitute the basis for the atom bomb. Those 2 elements were in my charts 20 years ago. Long before they were discovered they were in my charts, and beside them, in brackets, I had this notion. If these 2 elements were ever discovered, the pressure of this planet cannot hold them together. Beside those 2, there were 13 others that I didn't name that were yet to be discovered. They have discovered one of those since. How do I know? Surely I didn't get it from books. The only answer is God told me. That is the only answer. I knew it because all knowledge exists, and we can have it for the asking. All of that was merely a sign by means of which I could prove myself as an authority, as a messenger sent by God to do His bidding. All my life is a sign, a demonstration that power gained from the source was possible, and not from the manifestation of the source. As Glenn Clark said in his little book that I have lived 5 lives, it is because it's just as easy for me to live 5 lives as it is for you to live 1. And it is just as easy for you to multiply yourself by 5 or 10 as it is for me to have multiplied myself in that same way. This new civilization must live in a universe of knowing. I say this new civilization must stop depending solely upon the sensed universe of thinking and manifesting a borrowed power. It must live in the universe of knowing and know that from the source and believe it and make use of it. The purpose is for the saving of the whole human race. The Divine Iliad. It was given to me knowing that civilization would be self-destroyed unless it was met by this opposing seed of love that must be planted in order to draw out the seeds of hate and fear that are abroad in the land. In the words of the Divine Iliad, if love be in the world, hate cannot also be. The world has not yet come to that positive aspect of life because we are still so near the jungle, so near that we haven't cast off the fears and hatreds and greeds of the jungle. As soon as we got out of our animal existence and became aware of material things, a greed developed in us for material things. Greed and selfishness for possessions, material possessions, things of earth, things that have no meaning, things that we cannot take with us, and we pay for those things with our lives. We pay for them in dozen incarnations, perhaps to balance them instead of balancing our lives now with the qualities and values of heaven instead of those on earth. We are just wasting our lives. I have told you this, as I say reluctantly, but again joyously, because if my life can be an example, and if the way I have received my education can be an example to you, I encourage you to emulate it. If it helps to deliver the message which I am here to deliver, I'm glad to give it. If you really want to know much more about this than I have time to tell you, I would say go and get a book published by E. P. Dutton and Company, written by Richard Maurice Buck, the title of which is Cosmic Consciousness. Richard Maurice Buck had a touch of cosmic consciousness himself, and so it transformed him, and he gave the rest of his life to analyzing the symptoms of it and studying it, all down through history, studying all the cases he could find. He found 37, some of who just had a bit of it, and one only who had complete cosmic consciousness, Jesus the Nazarene. A few of it very deeply, but perhaps there were not more than 3 or 4 or 5 in all history. If some of you do not believe it possible, I merely point to the evidence of it in my life and in my works and the things I shall prove to you as I go along. And if you put them into effect yourself, you will find that God is the only reality in the universe. That all we have to consider and all we have to know is light. The light at the center of us and the 2 lights of motion, which is thinking from the spirit within us, mind and mind thinking, creator and creation, creator and those who are co-creating with God or alone by themselves. I chose to be a co-creator with God and stand upon that fulcrum. If you choose to depend entirely upon yourself, you will be way behind in your class for the few 100,000 years that you still have to go on that long journey to the mountaintop. But I am not concerned about even 10,000 years. I am concerned about these next 7 years. This messenger of the light must have hundreds of thousands of messengers of the light to spread this new comprehension, lest man destroy himself and begin all over again in the dark ages, a deeper and longer dark ages than we have ever known before. Who is Walter Russell? Internationally distinguished sculptor, painter, author, architect, composer, philosopher, scientist. Familiarly known as the most versatile man in America, the modern Leonardo, the man who tapped the secrets of the universe. He believed that every man has unlimited power to do whatever he desires to do, and that whatever he does, he should excel in it. Compiled in part from Who's Who in America and from Glenn Clark's story about Walter Russell's life in The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. First years. Born in Boston, May 19, 1871. Attended village school until nearly 10, then put to work as a cash boy because of family reverses. Musician and composer, 1884 to 1889. Church organist and music teacher from age 13 to 19. A natural musician, never having studied music. He gave piano recitals at 10 years of age. Composed about 100 musical themes before age 19. Paderewski accidentally heard him play and urged him to become a musician, and liked one composition so much he had it written into a manuscript form 30 years later after requesting Russell play it at a distinguished musical gathering. Illustrator, 1889 to 1898. First illustrated Mark Twain's magazines published by D. Lothrop, became Mark Twain's lifelong friend and later official sculptor, became art editor of Collier's, then resigned to represent Collier and Century magazines in the Spanish-American War. While there, he first met President Theodore Roosevelt, for whom he later became official painter. Painter from 1898. First painted his now infamous allegory, The Might of Ages, which won him international distinction and citations, honorable mentions and medals from 11 European countries, and the personal approval of King Alfonso of Spain and King Albert of Belgium, who later visited him at his New York studio. As a portrait painter, he specialized in children's portraits for many years, including children of President Theodore Roosevelt, Governor Oliver Ames of Massachusetts, and other notable families all over the country. In 1903, the Ladies' Home Journal commissioned him to select and paint the 12 most beautiful children in America. In 1914, he ceased painting children and painted many portraits of notables, including Sir Thomas Lipton, Archbishop Corrigan, Thomas A. Edison, Clayton Sedgwick Cooper, Bishop Alexander Garrett, Hudson Maxim, and many others. Architect, 1900 to 1926. Designed, financed, and erected the famous West 67th Street studio colony for artists, including the famous Hotel des Artistes. Also many other New York buildings such as the first Hotel Pierre at 48th and Park, Alwayne Court, and the West 81st and the West 86th Street studio buildings. Designed many buildings of Florida, including 2 whole civic centers. Sculptor from 1927. At the age of 56, never having touched sculpture, was commissioned by the Edison Company to make a bust of Thomas A. Edison, which had become the official bust. Since then, he has executed about 90 sculptural pieces, including the following 4 monuments: the Mark Twain Memorial, proclaimed as his masterpiece, the Charles Goodyear Memorial, the 4 Freedoms, the Christ of the Blue Ridge. Other portrait busts and bas reliefs include those of Cass Gilbert, Victor Herbert, Ossip Galberitz, John Philip Sousa, George Gershwin, Charles Goodyear, Colette D'Arville, Sir Thomas Lipton, Colin Kelly, Thomas Watson, General MacArthur, Cardinal Farley, Franklin Roosevelt, Dr. H. H. Sheldon, and others. Scientist. In 1926, he announced to the scientific world a complete and consistent plan for the constitution of matter to replace the present inconsistent one. He announced that then seemingly complete Mendeleev table of elements was incomplete, and gave the world new and complete charts of 9 octaves to replace the 5-octave Mendeleev chart. Including in his charts were the hydrogen isotopes, which led to the discovery of heavy water 3 years later, and the 6 transuranium elements, which gave atomic energy to the world 13 years later. Science has long resisted the Russell cosmology, for the acceptance by science would mean the complete overthrow of the present cosmology, yet the Russell cosmology is slowly seeping into conventional science, especially in industry and with engineers. He became president of the Society of Arts and Scientists in 1927 and held that post for 7 years. During that time, he conferred medals of honor to such persons in the arts and sciences as Thomas A. Edison, Robert A. Millikan, A. Michelson, Harlow Shapley, John Philip Sousa, Cass Gilbert, Yves Le Guyenne, and many others. For his new chemical charts and his work on hydrogen, a Doctor of Science degree was conferred on him by the American Academy of Sciences, which was chartered as a university with power to give degrees earned by work performed of a nature which would benefit mankind. Sports. Won national championship in figure skating at the age of 44 and held it for 4 years. Introduced figure skating in New York and gave first 2 skating carnivals in Madison Square Garden. Won 3 first prizes at 69. Owned a stable of Arabian and clay Arabian horses. Trained stallions for high school and saddle. Known as one of the best horsemen in America. Philosopher and lecturer. Has lectured upon the philosophy of life for many years. For 12 years was retained by International Business Machines Corporation to lecture the director and sales force upon new ethical principles for business, which placed service first ahead of sales first. Together with his philosopher wife, Lau Russell, has made many coast-to-coast lecture tours. They have also written a 1-year home study course in universal law, natural science, and living philosophy, which has already girdled the world in addition to their numerous other books. The Walter Russell Foundation, 1948. Lau Russell established this foundation as a permanent memorial to her husband and as the headquarters for their teachings. It became the University of Science and Philosophy in 1957. It is located on top of Mount Afton in Virginia, and consisted of an estate of 629 acres upon which an Italian Renaissance marble palace and sculptured gardens had been erected by wealthy Southerners at a cost of many millions. In this palace are gathered together many of Walter Russell's works in painting and sculpture, and in the gardens are the 4 Freedoms and the Christ of the Blue Ridge.